is Irene Watt, who will speak to Council on behalf of Kingston Faith and Justice Coalition regarding Report 69, received from the Planning Committee, Secondary Suite Implementation. Please.
Ready? Your Worship, Councillors. Irene and I are here representing the Kingston Faith and Justice Coalition. We are a group of local people of different faiths who concern ourselves with matters of social justice. Affordable housing, we think, is a social justice issue. We support allowing widespread rental secondary suites across the city of Kingston. You have already heard from Mariana Matovich and Kay Langmuir on this subject. They advanced many excellent reasons why you should allow more secondary suites across Kingston. They pointed out that the present system of requiring a zoning bylaw amendment for each property is expensive, slow, and altogether unsatisfactory. The Kingston Faith and Justice Coalition endorses these reasons. We also note that Provincial Bill 140, a bill named the Strong Communities Through Appropriate Affordable Housing Act, seems to leave you with the difficult job of deciding what the word appropriate means. Tonight we are asking you to keep in mind three things about rental secondary suites. 1, health and safety. During times of housing shortage, rents go up, and often maintenance of lower cost housing goes down. Kingston now has a disgraceful shortage of low cost housing. Poor maintenance is a health and safety issue. We doubt whether anyone in this room would willingly live in some of Kingston's present lower cost housing. We need more and better low cost housing, and we need it right now. 2, parking. As it is now, the City of Kingston has to insist on off-street parking for snow removal during the winter months. Therefore, a would-be landlord of a secondary suite has a choice. Either provide tenant parking or rent to people who have no vehicles and therefore don't need parking. Other cities who are far ahead of Kingston in the matter of secondary suites have found that many secondary suite tenants do not need parking because they don't own a vehicle. Some Kingston families with 2 or 3 or more people employed manage now to park safely 2 or even 3 vehicles. Where space allows, owners and renters of secondary suites would be no different. Who would benefit? Sorry, going to have to condense. People now trapped in horrible housing. Commuters who work in Kingston driving from lower cost housing that they are renting far away because they can't afford Kingston. Homeowners caught in a cost squeeze between rising costs of living and fixed or declining incomes. You've heard this before, I'm sure. Young couples who can't now afford mortgage payments. Contractors and skilled trades workers would have more work available in the off-season. Lastly, every taxpayer in the City of Kingston would benefit. As you know only too well, building low-cost housing or subsidizing rent for people with low incomes is extremely expensive. Secondary suites cost only a few extra inspection hours for the taxpayers. Tenants and homeowners pay all the rest. It's one of the few genuine bargains that you as a council will be offered. The Kingston Faith and Justice Coalition urge you, our duly elected representatives, to fulfill your obligations for secondary suites, as you know, mandated by the province. Do it in a timely way. That time is now. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Garrettson. Quite often I'm in favor of secondary suites in general, but I do sort of have a philosophy question. When you presume that secondary suites are affordable, is that because the idea is that there will be so many more apartments? Because in general, a homeowner is going to rent it whatever they can get. They're not going to turn it into a low-cost apartment unless maybe it's a family member. So is that the general feeling, that the more apartments there are, that will cause the rents overall to go down?
That has apparently been the experience elsewhere.
Thank you very much, ladies. Oh, sorry, was there another hand? Deputy Mayor Glover?
Thank you, Mayor Gerritsen. There's been some discussion at Council when this matter's been before us prior to its being deferred as to whether secondary suites should be city-wide or whether they should be made available in certain areas for specific reasons. The language here, widespread across the city, seems to have some waffle in it, and I wonder if the delegation would like to clarify that.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Glover. There is a difference of opinion among some of the members of our group. Some members of the Faith and Justice Coalition feel that no exemption should be made for secondary suites. They're also concerned about fairness, and they worry that the whole issue will become an endless political football and nothing will happen. A death by 1,000 report. I personally, now I'm speaking personally, I think a case could be made for 3 exemptions. Areas around Queens, around St. Lawrence College, that have already very dense student rentals. They are doing their share, I think, but this is just me. And thirdly, individual housing areas where we have very good public utility engineers who are really, really concerned about some of the infrastructure in some areas and leading into some houses. If they adequately document their concerns, then surely these places should be exempted until the infrastructure is up to standard. Now that's my personal opinion. But whatever you do, please don't make it an endless political football game. The need is too urgent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next delegation, Ms. Marilyn Birmingham, who will speak to Council regarding Report 69 received from the Planning Committee, Secondary Suite Implementation.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue of secondary suites. I am Vice Chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee of the City of Kingston, and although I am appearing here as an individual, not on behalf of that committee, I think the second report on secondary suites being considered tonight offers a better opportunity for the city to meet its commitments under the municipal housing strategy than the previous report. It is more likely to generate affordable housing opportunities that are desperately needed in our city. It still is not adequate. It still is written reluctantly and half-heartedly. Remember, the staff directed the consultants to recommend the Greenfields option. This resistance to find a means to use secondary suites to help meet housing needs may be a reflection of Council's excessive caution. Otherwise, why was the Housing and Homelessness Committee bypassed in considering the secondary suite options? If we had been involved in the process, it is likely we would have injected some enthusiasm and problem-solving approach to the subject. The initial report was presented to the Housing and Homelessness Committee as an information only. At that time, Commissioner Hurdle told us that the reason for choosing Greenfields was because it would not generate NIMBYism. That wasn't mentioned when it came to full council, but that was told to us. I strongly asserted that the city has to get over its fear of NIMBY phenomenon and get on with meeting the affordable housing crisis. This report is still not adequate. We cannot afford to wait 5 years to move forward on the secondary suite, on the secondary suite option. The central city is left out. This is an area where there is a pressing need for secondary suite alternatives, and there are neighborhoods where it would work. Much can happen in 2 years. The pressure to meet the need in other cities will lead other jurisdictions, more proactive than Kingston, trying methods of managing the challenge. They will be able to learn from their experience. I urge you to amend the recommendation to include an interim evaluation after 2 years, and I further urge you to amend the recommendation to include some areas of the central city. The excessively cautious approach in the second report is very clear. It provides evidence that most jurisdictions outside of Kingston found a slow uptake of the secondary suite option. It provides information on social dynamics that could have been used to set guidelines to distinguish which neighborhoods to include or not include, such as those close to post-secondary schools. But the report failed to capitalize on that information. What the report also fails to address is that some cramming of people and burdening infrastructure is happening regardless of secondary suite bylaw. Students are being crammed into housing meant for families. The breakdown in neighborhoods is happening without adequate bylaws that would govern legally secondary suite options. I'm almost done. The report doesn't remind you that in much of the city, houses were built with the expectation that larger families would reside in them. As the population in the city has grown and as family size has fell, many houses have only 1, 2, or 3 people living in them. The infrastructure in many areas could easily handle a small increase in population that has been observed in other jurisdictions. I want to note that the dynamic of removing the H for a whole designation from a home to be considered for a secondary suite has a benefit as well as a cost. If it adds to the expense of adding the unit, it will also slow down the process. The deterrent value, while something that doesn't enthrall me, does suit your purpose to managing secondary suite development in areas with infrastructure challenges. There is an emphasis on the negative aspect of this option without giving due value to the utility of the option. Where there is a will, there is a way. I look forward to greater initiative to finding means through provincial legislation and the city power to manage secondary suites without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And forbidding secondary suites in the whole of the central city is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Where there is a will, there is a way. Is there a will? That's what concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Hutchison.
Well, you mentioned in your presentation that there are areas in the central city where you think that secondary suites could be allowed, and I was just wondering what those areas might be.
Okay, I can't really give you a definitive answer. That's why we have city staff to do that sort of thing. Although I can think, I can shed some light on it. The area I live in, which is the Kings Court area, was built in the 50s. They're all essentially 3-bedroom houses, which were meant for 4 to 5 people in those days. As you know, normally 2 parents and 2 to 3 kids. Now, just looking at my own street, I've done a lot of canvassing for political things and there's a heart and stroke and various things. On my own street, a lot of the houses have 1 or 2 or 3 people. The infrastructure was built to deal with way more of those people numbers. I know some of the Kings Court area does have flooding problems, but even the city staff analysis of flooding found that it was due to rain events and melt, not because extra people were flushing their toilets and using their sinks. Anyway, I feel that my area could probably accommodate some secondary suites, and surely there's other areas that, maybe even a better place. There are a few illegal ones in my area, I have to admit, but not in my house. Anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The third delegation this evening is Ms. Caitlin Byrick, Projects Manager, Member Services for Downtown Kingston BIA, who will speak to Council regarding Clause 3, Report 70 from the Arts, Recreation, Community Policies